First, I want to just welcome everyone to the International Society for the Study of Rule Crime's second virtual roundtable. We're very thrilled to have everybody in attendance. I will be your host for all of this, moderating. My name is Jessica Peterson, and I am an assistant professor in the Criminal Justice Department at the University of Nebraska in Kearney, Nebraska. It is 1:30 a.m. here, so if you see me sneaking coffee, that's why. We are very, very happy to have four fantastic different panelists with us today who will all help educate us on some of the challenges that they've identified in relation to rural policing, as well as some initiatives that they have identified in helping address some of those challenges in their communities. So I think Alistair put this in the chat, but feel free to use the hashtag ISSRC 2020 if you want to tweet out during the event. The entire session will last about 75 minutes. So before we get started, there's a couple of ground rules and guidelines for participation that I just want to kind of get out of the way. The first is that we ask that you do keep your microphones muted throughout the session, just to kind of help with excess noise. Each panelist will spend about 6 to 8 minutes highlighting both a challenge and an initiative that addresses rural policing. And then once they do that, I'll keep the time frame pretty strict, because once they do this, I will open the floor for a question and answer session. So we definitely encourage, your participation. If you want to use the virtual raise your hand function to be able to verbalize a question, we will unmute you and you can pose a question to either a specific panelist or to the panel in general. Alternatively, if you prefer, you can also type a question into the chat at any time. And once we get to that Q&A session, I will read it aloud for everyone. And then as a final reminder, the meeting is being recorded. This is for educational purposes only, and it will be available on the ISSRC's website. So now that you kind of know what the schedule is going to look like and how it's going to run, I definitely want to give a quick little introduction to the different speakers that we have today. So the first speaker is Christian Mohana, who has a PhD in sociology, as well as more than 20 years of experience in the French police forces. He is a permanent researcher at the French National Center for Scientific Research and the former director of the Center for Sociological Research on Law and Criminal Justice Institutions. Our second speaker is going to be Tori Heaney. She is with us today. She has a degrees in criminology and business, as well as a graduate certificate in intelligence analysis. So when she is not working on her family farm in rural Victoria, she is providing analysis, advice, and research direction for the Farm Crime Coordination Unit of Victoria Police in Australia that focuses on livestock theft and other farm-related crimes. For our third speaker, we will hear from Inspector Alan Drawn, who has worked in the police service for over 28 years, including a period with the Scottish Crime and Drug Enforcement Agency. He is currently based at the Scottish Crime Campus, where he serves as the Rural Crime Coordinator for Police Scotland. And beyond his role in rural crime prevention, he also chairs the Scottish Heritage Crime Group that ensures responsible access to Scotland's rich environment and outdoor life. And then finally, last but not least, our fourth speaker will be Cameron Whiteside, who is a detective inspector with the New South Wales Police Force in Australia. His 31-year career started in 1989, and it has included positions such as operational detective, detective sergeant, and then finally detective inspector. He's also currently the inaugural and current state rural crime coordinator for the rural crime prevention team that covers the regional New South Wales. So this is basically an area that's 4 times the size of the UK and is comprised of 20 different police districts and police area commands. So we will go ahead and get started with Christian. So Christian, you can go ahead and start us off.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody, and thank you very much for organizing this meeting. and sorry for my French accent. I belong to a center which is a center for sociological research on law and penal institutions. We are a lot of researchers from sociology, history, political sciences, statistics, and we are working on police, courts, and prisons in France and public policies about crime and security matters. We are depending from several institutions, the French Ministry of Justice, the National Center for Scientific Research, and two universities, the universities of Paris-Saclay, a very big one, and Cergy University. That's only one word to present you very briefly my institution. What's the problem? Yeah. And I will speak about the French rural policing. And when you speak about this matter, there is a very strong organization, which is the Gendarmerie Nationale, a military police force, more than 100,000 civil servants. They are militaries, they don't have unions, and they have squads all over the French territory. What is very important is that this Gendarmerie Nationale is a very centralized organization with a top-down systems, with the national director of the Gendarmerie Nationale who sets the priorities for all the squads all along the territory. That's very strange for, I know, English people or others to face with this very centralized organization. This Gendarmerie Nationale is in charge of policing 95% of the French territory. That's very important because even in France we have like some desert territories without populations. But anyway, that represents 50% of the French populations. That's to say the villages and the cities over 20,000 inhabitants. And the Gendarmerie Nationale is facing a problem. It's to maintain the link with the rural communities, with the populations in these rural areas. For many reasons, the gendarmerie has lost the link with the population because of new public management. They are turned to produce statistics, results for the central administration, and there are very few involved in negotiation with local communities. The national organization has decided 10 years ago to merge many squads. So one squad is covering a bigger territory, so it's hard to maintain the link with all small villages. We have a lot of mayors. We have more than 30,000 mayors and villages who have mayors in France. So it's important to maintain the link even with these people. And we have also this new phenomenon, gendarmes who wants to live in urban areas and no more in rural areas because they have no access to theaters, cinemas, to universities, and they want to quit these rural areas to go in cities or near cities. And the chiefs are afraid of this situation, and they want to maintain this link with the population and to avoid the police national situation. The police national is working in the cities, and as perhaps you know, there are a lot of problems with the population. The police officers are more and more rejected by the population, and the problem is with these gaps, they have no or few information. They can do few intelligence in these urban areas, and the gendarmerie chiefs are afraid of facing the same problem in the rural areas. And what they have decided to create, these chiefs of the gendarmerie, is a gendarme without office. The idea is to give all gendarmes modern, what they call a modern tool, smartphones with a lot of apps they have files, they can control everything, they have legal proceedings, they have the law are all involved, included in these smartphones. And the idea is to give them this smartphone, this office, and to send them to permanent patrols and not to allow them to go back to the offices because they are afraid of having what we have now, Gendarme who are spending most of their time in their offices for making paperwork. The goal is so to increase mobility and to stop to have all troops inside offices and to maintain this direct contact with the population because the gendarmes, the chiefs, they know that if you don't have contact with the population, you won't be able to control, and it's a big challenge in the French policies, to control what is going into these rural areas. And that's why they want that the gendarmes still maintain this contact. The problem is, will the gendarme adhere to this policy? We can see many reluctance, and the apps are only used for control and no more, and not always to improve this link with the population. We are conducting a big research on this issue, and we are looking at the field to see how the local gendarmes are working, are accepting this mission, this new way of working. And you can see that, of course, they don't have problem with smartphones because everybody is using smartphones now, but they often prefer to go back to their office. They don't want to stay all day long in their car or out of their car speaking with the population. And that's the big challenge for us at the moment as far as rural policing is concerned. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was great. We will now be moving to the second speaker. So Tori, you can go ahead and take it away.
Thanks for having me here today, and thanks to Jessica to organising this roundtable. I don't have quite as much experience as my fellow panellists, so I have my notes blasted all behind me, so please excuse me, but I will get started. So I'll start with a brief background of the policing model that we use here. In 2011, Victoria Police established a livestock and farm crime specialist group across the state to deal specifically with livestock and farm-related crime investigation. In developing this specialist group, it was identified that there were police members across Victoria who had high levels of knowledge, skills and expertise to deal with livestock and farm-related thefts. These members had a passion to address rural crime and the requisite skills to investigate this crime thing. By creating this group of subject matter consultants, Victoria Police started to address the fundamental concerns of the farming communities and related sectors across Victoria. In 2019, to complement and invigorate the existing model, Victoria Police established the Farm Crime Coordination Unit, which consists of a detective inspector and a farm crime advisor, which is me. The existing agricultural liaison officer role was rebranded to the Farm Crime Liaison Officer to more accurately encapsulate the role of these members. The FCCU, as we're known, was created to strengthen and facilitate the work undertaken by the liaison officers across the state by providing a coordinated response to target farm crime by monitoring crime trends and patterns, developing intelligence, and working with local police to proactively and reactively address issues. We currently have 68 farm crime liaison officers across the state who work in varied areas of Victoria Police and have high levels of knowledge, skills, and expertise to deal with farm-related crime. Recent figures show that Victoria has almost 29,000 farms with over 22 million beef and dairy cattle, sheep and lambs, pigs, poultry, and other animals. More than 40% of Australian lamb and 60% of Australian milk production is from Victoria. From a policing perspective, the main farm crime themes apparent within Victoria are livestock theft, farm and equipment theft, animal activism, illegal hunting, and firearm theft. But of these, the most unique challenge we face is from livestock theft. Livestock theft is one of, if not the main cause of concern within farming communities. And while we know that rural and farm crime is by no means just livestock theft, it is a significant issue affecting Victorian farmers and something that needs to be addressed. and it's in this area that we face some of our primary challenges. So figures from the Crime Statistics Agency in Victoria show that the minimum value of sheep and cattle stolen across the state between 2015 and 2019 is $7.6 million. From that figure, we can conservatively estimate that during this time, between 30 and 35,000 sheep and cattle have been stolen from Victorian farms. It affects farmers' livelihoods and has a negative impact on the communities and individuals affected. So there are a number of challenges involved in solving livestock theft, but today I'm going to highlight a different concern, and that is the issue of underreporting. Consultation with police members, industry representatives, and rural community members indicate that a large amount of farm crime goes unreported, a fact that is well known in both policing and rural criminological areas. If you talk to any farmer, they can list any number of neighbours or associates that have experienced some form of livestock theft, but if you ask them whether they've reported those instances to police, the answer is quite often no. While there are a number of reasons that victims may not report livestock theft or other farm crime, the two reasons I'll highlight are delaying in reporting from when the offence may have occurred and due to concerns that police might not take the report seriously. Yes, it is known that the more time that passes between when a crime is committed and when police are notified reduces the chance of the offence being solved. Crimes such as stock theft are often not discovered immediately, and sometimes well after the event has occurred, meaning there may be little physical evidence to recover and few avenues of inquiry to follow up. This, coupled with concerns that the report won't be taken seriously or the full impact of the situation not taken into account, creates doubt in police ability to solve these crimes, leading to further hesitation in reporting. But it isn't the complete lack of reporting as a whole. When we speak to members in rural stations, we hear the same story again and again. Farmers mentioning livestock theft as an aside to police, not wanting to make an actual report, but just let the members know that so they're in the loop. The challenge is getting them to see the value of their information. While underreporting of farm crime remains prevalent, we cannot gain an accurate picture of the scale of the problem. When the data reflects low numbers of reports, it's difficult to justify allocating resources. The main focus we're driving is encouraging members of rural communities to report, not just all stock theft and all farm crime, but any suspicious activity or behaviour. Members of rural communities know their own areas better than anyone else. They recognise their neighbours and the vehicles that traverse the local roads on a daily basis or are parked on the side of the road while they fix a fence. They talk to each other and they know what's going on. Even elements relating to known offenders and methods used for disposal avenues for stolen livestock are quite often known to locals within rural communities. It's hard for us to do anything if we don't know about it in the first place. We believe, and the message we are driving to Victorian farmers and rural communities, is that every piece of the puzzle is important, and members of the public might have the last piece of the puzzle that is needed. All knowledge is useful. They might only have 3 numbers of a number plate, but it might be the 3 numbers that someone else didn't see. We need people to speak up to assist us in solving crimes. Every report helps us to gather intel to form patterns and trends. This information is then used to inform police tasking. Here at Victoria Police, we use a tasking and coordination process. We assign resources where they are needed, and responses are intelligence-led. If we don't receive reports to know things are happening, we don't know to allocate resources. Our aim is to embolden and empower farmers and members of rural communities to take control of their circumstances. We need to get back to the basics, to encourage reporting, to increase confidence, both in police members in their interactions with people from those communities, but also in victims of farm crime to have confidence that police take these crimes seriously. We need to encourage farmers to be vigilant. There may not be any sign of damage to fences or gates, meaning that farmers might not be aware that a theft has occurred. We need to provide community members with the tools to take steps to prevent crimes. When it comes to helping to reduce the instances of livestock theft, these tips include regular stock counts, keeping fences well maintained, ensuring all stock are correctly tagged and identifiable, securing stockyards to prevent unauthorised use, using CCTV. As with all crime prevention, the aim is to make it harder for the offenders to commit crimes without getting caught. We're doing this by increasing public awareness of the role of the farm crime liaison officers and the farm crime coordination unit within Victoria Police. We're encouraging communities and victims of farm crime to utilise the services available to them. There have been a number of campaigns calling for information about livestock theft and farm crime. We're talking about livestock theft in the media. We're highlighting instances of livestock theft on social media. We have, and will continue to do so once we're back in a COVID-safe environment, attended agricultural field days and shows. We're engaging with external stakeholders to work with them in relation to farm-related crime. We're monitoring investigations, ensuring investigators are provided with the subject matter expertise and assistance they require. Yes, these are the basics, because we need to ensure we're taking these small step initiatives and focusing on getting them right to achieve the bigger picture. We need to ensure we build bridges between local communities and people and the police that look after these communities. We need to provide a consistent, coordinated approach, and we want people to know that Victoria Police take farm crime seriously. The end.
Thank you so much, Tori. That was great. We'll now go ahead and hear from Alan.
Very good morning to you all, and again, as with everyone, thanks for setting this up. Very, very much appreciated. In terms of us here in Scotland, it's actually been very heartening listening to Chris and Tori, because we've actually got exactly the same issues. So again, that's a good starting point. But from our perspective, Scotland, relatively small country, 5.4 million of a population, but 90% plus is designated as being rural. And the geography of it causes us some issues. But for us, it's trying to actually get, as Tori's just highlighted, folks to appreciate that policing take everything seriously. It doesn't matter whether it's the smallest incident or the largest crime, it's all and should get treated in exactly the same manner, regardless of where you are in terms of geography or demographics. But for us, with this size of country, initially it was one rural crime coordinator and one police officer to cover the whole country. So starting internally, we had a bit of an issue to try and generate a response to take this seriously, to actually understand that what we do, there's reasons for it. And the way that we tried to do that was to link it with organised crime, which we were able to prove very easily. But to do that, we also tried to focus on firstly getting a rural crime strategy. And that was, I think, one of the keys to trying to overcome any challenge. It negated that people didn't think policing took it seriously. So we actually gave a proper strategy to Scotland about rural crime. In it, we kept it very simple. We listened to people, and we actually tried to become very visible. But by making it personal, we then thought that we could try and engage more from the rural communities throughout Scotland. So just like what Tori was saying about trying to actually engage, or what, as Chris was saying, ensure there's linkage between the policing and the rural communities. So we had something that was tangible to give out, but it spelled out a very straightforward vision, aim, 4 objectives and 7 priorities for Scotland about what we are going to do to tackle rural crime. Coupled with that, then we also have the challenge of being visible. Obviously, with only having 1-on-1 initially, it was difficult to then try and gain the trust, actually ensure that people understood that we were here to listen to them when you're trying to cover the country. But as of just 2 weeks ago, I can delighted to say that Police Scotland have actually taken on board some of the evidence that we've produced. And my wee department now consists of an inspector, a sergeant, 3 constables, and interestingly enough, an architectural liaison officer for the whole of the country, so we can try to provide on-the-ground prevention advice to anyone regardless of their location. But also in tandem with developing the strategy and trying to get that linkage and trust and visibility, we had to prove evidence, and that proved tricky, because that's, I think, one of our biggest challenges was actually trying to get, as Tori highlighted, what is the extent of crime in Scotland if it's in a rural environment? How many things are actually reported? How many instances go unreported, but everybody knows who did something or knows who actually might have done it? So we've tried to then break it down by the 13 policing divisions in Scotland to try and engender some local connectivity, try to get folks more and more to report locally to then feed that into a national picture. So that way we've got a bit more of a clearer understanding of who's doing what around Scotland. Not surprisingly, a lot of it is linked, and it's quite often the same criminality that's travelling. So we have an issue obviously with transient criminality that's moving around the rural communities, which then makes it as another challenge quite hard to then track if they cross a border or they cross into a different division, then who's tracing their route, and as they go, who's then after them. But slowly we're starting to get there, and I think encouragingly, it's always about looking forward for us. So we've obviously now got a bigger department. I actually feel some sort of comfort when I heard the amount of area that Cameron and Tori have to look after. For Scotland, I say it's big enough for us. And with a bit of luck, if we can engender partnership approach, which is key, trying to make sure that others within the rural communities actually assist, because policing cannot do it all. We cannot simply try to arrest our way out any issues. We must start with prevention and education, and we must rely on those who are in the rural communities. And I think sometimes that's where policing can miss it, because at the end of the day, there's many people across any country who have the knowledge, they live in a community, they have pride in a community. How do you then give them ownership to then take that pride and make sure that no criminology, no crime can happen within their area? And if we can reduce the offences and the crime within their area, then they obviously feel safer, and then it's reducing on the impact of the fear of crime. So in terms of a quick sort of success and what we've tried to engender, certainly in Scotland, one of the things we've developed is Rural Watch. So it's a national scheme, very much like maybe a neighbourhood watch scheme that various other places will have. But again, it's trying to make it personal. So it's called Rural Watch, so people straight away feel there's an identity. The logo and the feel of it makes it feel very rural. So whether you're a crofter, whether you're a big landowner or landowning estates, if you are in that sphere, you actually feel somebody's there for you, where you can report any incident, regardless of how big, how small. You can actually then know that somebody will come and visit you, or they'll pass on an alert, which will allow us hopefully to catch whoever is perpetrating an incident or offence quicker. And the whole point is to try and ensure that people talk to each other, and we can get the right people to the right places, hopefully at the right time, to catch then the right people. But again, it's communication. Communication is key. And again, perception builds from communication. If there's great communication and we can change that perception that policing in Scotland takes everything that happens within a rural environment seriously, and we'll actually respond to it, it will get the same level of investigation, and we will go out our way to try and then, particularly if it's unfortunately a repeat offender, victim, go back and speak to them, try and reassure them. Then we'll try and bring in the preventative methods. Can we use the architectural liaison officer to try and strengthen what is round about them in terms of a prevention approach, just to ensure there's a bit of reassurance. And then for any repeat offender that is offending specifically within the rural environment, we will undoubtedly target them, just to let them know that we know that that is what they, if you like, specialise in. And if they go out into a rural environment, we will be there with them. Because again, that is one of the challenges. Somebody goes in to commit a crime or offence in a rural environment where there's less CCTV, less eyes and ears. They think they actually can operate with far, far greater ease. We need to make sure that they know that the rural environment from a policing perspective is a very hostile environment if they want to commit crime. So hopefully that just gives you a little bit of an insight into what we try and do here in Scotland. And thanks very much indeed.
Thank you so much. Yeah, starting to see some common themes, definitely. Appreciate that. We will now move on to our fourth and last speaker, which is Cameron. So go ahead, Cameron.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen if it's okay. Have we got that?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, thank you, Jess, and hello everyone. I would like to thank the ISSRC for affording me this opportunity, and in particular, Jess, Kyle, and Alistair for making this happen for me in our team. I'd also like to acknowledge Alan, Tori, and Christian for letting us share the stage with them, and it's very insightful, some of the things that you're seeing from across Australia and also overseas. And I think the one thing in common is that we're all suffering the same issues in respect to rural crime. First part of the question, what are the key challenges for rural policing in New South Wales? Before speaking on this, I need to provide the definition of what rural crime is, and it's been adopted by the New South Wales Police Force since 2014. The reason for this is that far too often, in my opinion, both the complexity of and in the same time simplicity of rural crime is confused and lost by police academics and the wider public. It is often swallowed up when speaking about crime in rural areas as opposed to rural crime. This has a negative impact on the reporting, prevention, disruption and responding to rural crime. So what is rural crime? Rural crime in New South Wales is defined as incidents of crime that impact on the function of the pastoral, agricultural and aquacultural industries. The key phrase is impact on the function. Simplified even more, and I think Cole uses it quite often, is the term farm crime, which is used across other parts of the world. The definition does not include all crimes or incidents committed in rural locations. Incidents do not include domestic violence offences on a rural property, motor vehicle accidents on rural roads or cannabis plantations. The key challenges in New South Wales, and from my readings and years of policing in rural communities, the key challenges are not new. There is a distinct lack of community confidence in police and the judiciary, under-reporting, delayed reporting, police capability to adequately respond to, resource and investigate rural crimes, in particular stock theft. The correct reporting of rural crime, which impacts on statistical data, which is in essence, moulds research and policing response amongst other areas. I know this is no surprise, as much of the research is linked to the members of ISSRC and others on the forum. The majority of research focuses on the police capability, and rightly so, but only a few highlights the victim, farmer and industry addressing their vulnerabilities and target hardening their properties, including stock identification. The Bradshaw report in 2016 made it quite clear that much more could be done. Steve said the current police response to crime in rural and remote communities was brought into question at every public consultation held over the course of the review. He said that stock theft, rural trespass and illegal hunting are crimes of major concerns to rural isolated communities. These crimes can lead to significant economic loss to primary producers and rural communities. On the back of the Bradshaw report, I'm pleased to say that this is changing significantly in New South Wales, and we've got a long way to go, but we've had, I believe, a good start. With a dedicated rural crime prevention team addressing the police capability to respond, disrupt and respond in respect to rural crimes. How are we changing and what are the innovations that are being deployed to address these challenges? In 2017 or beginning of 2018, our Commissioner made a commitment to the regional New South Wales to address the incidents of rural crime around the state. And what I'll show you here shortly is a small snippet of that. Mr Fuller outlined, to realise our vision for a safer New South Wales, we must now focus on prevention, disruption, response and capability. The Rural Crime Prevention Team, known as the RCPT, has adopted this as our core values and would aim to be one of the best policing agencies in the world by addressing these core but simple aspects of crime fighting. We've grown from 34 rural crime investigators in 2017 and 34 investigators which are rural crime investigators. And quickly, our rural crime investigators are all detectives, criminal investigators who are subject matter experts. And I'm not sure, and I suggest it's the same across the world, is that the skills are not reversible in terms of general crime. My detectives can investigate everything up to a homicide, but there's other investigators that traditionally do the common general investigations would not know where to start in terms of stock theft. So it's quite unique. In 2018, we grew from 34 to 46 and included 4 unsworn staff. And I've just noticed that there's one or two of them actually watching here now, so I better be careful with what I say. So we've got 46. We've got 3 intelligence analysts around the state and a policy and projects officer who helps us obviously with our policy and projects within the team and many other things. We've just had an announcement that our team is going to increase with another 18 over the next 2 years. So we'll have, by the end of 22, we'll have 64 in our team, which in essence is 60 investigators, including myself and the detective sergeants. Our analysts, I've just touched on them. Traditionally, we have analysts in New South Wales Police, in my submission, have not felt part of a team. And this is a problem that's developed over many years. Our analysts are very much on equal footing with investigators and are tasked to show initiative, not just become number crunchers to make me and other bosses look good in front of others. Today they take it a step further and they've organised a video conference on a monthly basis with other intelligence analysts across all the states and territories in New South Wales, sharing common problems with rural crime, which I'm quite excited about. You'll see from the image on the screen that we've got a set uniform, and it's hard getting detectives into uniform, believe me, but what it does is it gives us an identity within the community and at sale yards, so the local community know who we are, they know who to come and speak to and have confidence in what we do. I'll skip through that slide. This is a set of where all our staff are and the rank structure. If those that are familiar with that map, that's a map of New South Wales and it identifies where we're all located around the state. I have four detective sergeants, that support the rural crime investigators, and as I said, we've got 38 of those at this point in time. The key priorities of the rural crime prevention team is educating frontline police. Initially, is that we've conducted an internal workshop training our first responders in all things from rural crime through stock theft, dealing with external agencies, taking reports, sale yard visits, etc., and which is already showing reward in terms of the service we provide to the community. Increased social media presence. When we started, we had 13,000 followers, and as of just now, we've got over, what's even higher than that now, it's about 46,000, an increase of 230, 240% over the period. For example, I posted something a short while ago, about 2 hours ago, on our site, and it's had 50,000 followers already, and there's been over 200 comments from a horse that's been shot and killed, and we had to exhume the carcass, and it's getting significant attention. The approach we've got with media is to report not all the things that traditionally police always report on, is the homicides, the drug busts, the fatalities. We report on things from small amounts of diesel that are stolen right through to the significant rural crimes, because they're the crimes that impact upon the farmer, and the more serious crimes is not something, unfortunately, that impacts on everyone. Our enhanced community engagements, prior to COVID, we conduct around the state workshops with farmers, teaching them everything from crime scene preservation to reporting, the use of drones and their legalities. We've now changed, and we're about to start next month 6 webinars with New South Wales Farmers Association to connect with those farmers on similar topics, and you're welcome to join those seminars too, just to give it a plug if I may. We've had a significant focus on operation and investigations, especially illegal hunting and trespassing, aimed squarely at reporting and increasing community confidence. Our developing stronger stakeholder engagement is another key priority, and in essence it's taking our blinkers off, and examples of that is the work we're doing at the University of New England, and in terms of a farm survey they're conducting, a unit of study addressing rural crime and the lack of underreporting and delayed reporting, presenting at the university. And I also see that one of our crime prevention officers who's located at Armadale is watching too. G'day, Chris. Recently we launched a Operation Stock Check, which is an operation aimed at disrupting the theft corridors of stock. Just traditionally people think that stock is stolen in big semi-trailers. However, we're finding that small numbers of stock are being stolen from and placed in utes, trailers, horse floats, and even potentially gutted out caravans. So what are we doing? We're training up all our uniform police with the confidence and knowledge of how to do that themselves, because in essence these stock thefts are happening in the middle of the night and we're not always out. So we're giving the confidence of the cops that have come to the country from the city that don't know what cattle are or what stock are, and give them the skills on how to interact with those with those crooks. It's aimed squarely at offenders, not at farmers or legal livestock carriers. And I'm pleased to say there is some significant interest, and I notice my colleague from South Australia is online here tonight too. We're sharing that operation and hope to go national within the next few weeks. It's an ongoing operation and has no end date. All in all, and all the while, everything we're aimed at doing is enhancing the police districts, or the uniformed police and commanders in our 21 districts, their capability of the ownership of crime. So we're trying to remove the perception that it's just not the rural crime investigators that are the ones that are addressing the rural crime. It's everyone's got a responsibility, and we're more or less in this together. So the future is quite promising. We're working with external agencies in relation to GPS tagging of stock, retinal scanning, because one of the biggest issues we're finding with stock theft, and it's no secret, is the lack of identification, the delayed in reporting, which will be covered off by satellite devices telling us when the stock's being stolen. Just to make our response more timely, increase the opportunity of having a successful prosecution. And sorry, I didn't click through all these slides as I was going. But there's an example of some of the devices there. And that's about it. I'm sorry for rushing through it. I don't know how I went for time. I might have went a bit over.
That's okay. We actually are at the point, though, where we can move into the question and answer portion. Just to kind of remind you, there are a couple ways that you can engage with the panelists. We certainly, encourage your interaction, and we can unmute you and let you ask your question verbally. You can do that by either typing into the chat. You can also use the raise your hand function. So if you go into participants, if you click participants, you can hit the raise your hand option there to grab your place in line. Otherwise, feel free to type things into the chat so we can go ahead and get going. A couple things that I guess just to kind of get things rolling, I am interested in kind of hearing, I know some of you have had quite extensive experience in policing. Over time, what are kind of the areas where you've seen the most significant changes in types of issues that come up in these rural areas for law enforcement? Just kind of pose that to everyone. Have there been changes in the types of significant issues that have come up for policing in these spaces?
Jess, I think that one of the biggest changes in recent years and over time is probably technology and the avenues that farmers and rural people can report their crimes. We've touched on a number of those tonight around the world. Like most places, we've got the ability to, obviously the best thing is one-on-one, but there's anonymous reports, there's via the internet, and obviously that is also transferred into the policing methods of reporting, where we've got tablets and increasing our capability in terms of taking reports there and then. So we can get them in real time. What we try and do in the rural space is that a lot of our staff in rural areas have come from city areas which haven't got a background in the rural industry. So we were trying to make it easier for both the victim and the police in that. For an example of that is that we've developed a stock theft template which we can email to the farmer and they'll email it back to us. So in real time we can get the records and check the database in respect to what's been stolen. Of course, like in some places, it could be hundreds of kilometres away to make that inspection on the property in terms of the theft. So that can be all happening in the background whilst the police attend there. So it's probably the biggest thing and the most exciting thing I think too is technology. On top of example of it is here now, and to be able to share these problems from around the world and come up with solutions. So I think technology is probably the biggest thing for me.
I think, Jess, if it's okay, I'll jump in there as well. I would add to that certainly one of the aspects that we've noticed in Scotland is undoubtedly the increase in organised crime groups that are now infiltrating the rural environment, whether that be through buying up small holdings, farms, areas of land. And again, it's back down to this whole thing of visibility, actually community spirit. Who is your neighbour? Who do you actually know who your neighbour is? And by and large, over many, many years, the farming, rural communities have been a very trusting community. Doors get left open, vehicles will have keys in them. They would do anything to help their neighbour. Whereas now, who is their neighbour? And that's a challenge because some of the sort of crime that's ongoing is very much hidden But again, when you've got no eyes and ears, vast areas to do whatever your business is, we've certainly noticed a shift. And that's one of the reasons that we've sort of focused on targeting organised crime, because if we can nip it at a low level, and then obviously it feeds it up the tree, then again, it's trying to engender to people that we do care what goes on in the rural environment, but it's trying to be aware of what's moving into the rural rather than waiting till it's happened.
Nice, thank you. I did see a couple questions that popped up in the chat. So it looks like Jeanette asks, how do the panelists feel about the magistrate response to prosecutions?
I haven't paid my house off as yet, and I'm not answering that. No, it's a good question, and I think historically, and I think there is a lot of court bashing that goes on. But I think as an investigator over the years, I think a lot of the time you can only take it towards, you can only be critical of that if you have put everything you possibly can before the court. What I say by that is that too often, and there'll be times, and I've seen in the past, when matters have been put before the court, that the antecedents or the extra information, if you would, in respect to that person's before the court or the crime, the details of the impact of that crime is not relayed properly to the magistrate. Because again, it's the same problem. You may have a magistrate that's never have crossed the Sydney Harbour Bridge. So you have to tell them exactly what impact this has on, both on a fiscal level, but also on an emotional level, because it just has a huge impact. And what we're finding now, and I've reviewed some of these matters over the years, is that there's, people will first to tell you that it doesn't pass the pub test and they'll whinge about a result. But the reality is the police haven't put their best foot forward, and that just means taking it an extra level and explaining it it's like you're telling a story to them and arm them with everything possible to sentence those people. But then again, there are times when we do that and it just the sentence doesn't reflect, and that's probably just in essence the judiciary system. That's what it's there for. It's for the magistrate to pose a sentence based upon the information before them. So it's a good question, and I think we've tried to, and we continue to try to develop our staff to increase that capability. But even I've heard that we should be given opportunity to speak at to magistrates at conferences, and the reality is that we can do more ourselves before it gets to that stage.
Thank you, Cameron. We had a question come in for Christian from Chris Jordan. He asks, you mentioned in France that there is a problem with recruitment in rural areas. What incentives is France doing to recruit and retain police in rural areas?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Because we have a national force, people are recruited all over the country. They want to enter the gendarmerie because of the prestige, because it's a military force and so on. And the youngest gendarmes are those who are beginning their career. They are sent to the places where nobody wants to go. That's the same with the Police Nationale, with the French banlieue, the poor areas. You have the youngest police officers, and in rural areas where nobody wants to go, you have the youngest gendarmes, and they spend 4 or 5 years, and then they leave to go to better places. So the problem is that we don't have, they don't have time to build confidence with the population, because the gendarmes change very quickly every 4 years. And so it's hard to build a network with all the people. But to answer to the question of prosecution, in France, the problem is that the courts are in the cities, and the prosecutors are very involved in the fighting against crime in the cities, and they are not very interested to follow the stories of rural crimes. So that's another problem also.
Thank you. We also had a question earlier on that's both for Tori and Cameron.
Excuse me, Jess, my computer is just going to automatically restart and I'll dial back in. I miss you, that's where I'm going.
Okay. So we'll pose this, I guess, to Tori first. Emmanuel asks, getting support of farmers can sometimes be difficult because people involved in the victimization of them may be people known to them. What, in your opinion, can be strategies to get farmers to report without fearing for their lives? Oh, Tori, you are on mute right now.
Sorry, guys. With that, we like to push the message with all of our messaging to, if they're not comfortable reporting crime or they think that there'll be retribution, to report anonymously. We have Crime Stoppers, our reporting channel, who take anonymous calls and via online, so that people have that option to stay safe if they need to.
If I can just say as well, Jess, in our New South Wales Farm Crime Survey, the second most common reason for not reporting, surprisingly, was fear of reprisal, oftentimes because the offence is committed or perceived to have been committed by a neighbour or someone close to them.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see, I guess we will, I don't want to go back to Cameron since his computer is probably restarting right now. So let's see here. We have one that's also for Tori and Cameron. So Tori, I guess this will be posed to you first. John Barr said that livestock identification has been a common theme with both of what Tori and Cameron spoke about. Other than normal ear tags, is any other method of sheep identification in use in Australia to aid prevention and detection of theft?
This actually would have been a good one for Cameron, because I know it's something that they're doing a lot of work up in New South Wales. The NLIS system, which is the tagging system in Australia, is the primary method of identification at the moment. There are a number of companies and organisations that are looking into options, but we're yet to find exactly the right one. But hopefully something will be developed soon. It just is, it makes it a little bit harder for thieves to cut the tags out, essentially, make it a bit harder to steal the animals.
Yeah.
If I may,
Yes.
again, Jess, just to build on that, because I've been working closely with New South Wales Police, but also some different tag providers out this way. There are a few different types of tags kind of on the horizon to aid in tracking livestock, particularly when it's stolen, but also it has the capacity to kind of notify if something's going on with the cattle, for instance, they're being rustled or anything like that. So there's a few different ones coming onto the market. We at the Center for Rural Criminology have been engaged by a company called Ceres Tag, which is a smart animal ear tag to examine its crime prevention capacity in terms of livestock theft specifically. That trial will take place in December of this year, and so we'll have some outcomes in the next couple of months.
Great.
Jess.
Alan, yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jess, if I could come in there.
Yeah.
In Scotland, we piloted a very innovative product by a company called Tech Tracer. And what Tech Tracer developed was marking that goes in with the keel, you know, the paint that you mark the sheet with. And it was wee data tag sort of dots that hid within the paint. Didn't do anything to the animal itself. It wasn't absorbed in you know, the skin, stayed within the fleece. And working in conjunction with the media, putting out very good signage, which they'd produced, particularly because the signage had eyes on it. And again, studies, I think it's by University of Groningen in the Netherlands and Newcastle in England, show that any signage which has eyes in it makes people think there must be cameras close by. And we found that by doing a really good proactive media campaign, signage that was very prominent, and then actually ensuring that, you know, the keel was applied properly, it actually reduced significantly instances of livestock theft from those farmers or landowners who actually applied it. What it did also show that it moved the problem, because somebody who's stealing livestock obviously then went elsewhere. So hopefully we then targeted where they went and reduced the opportunity for them. Really a good product. Many now landowners, livestock owners through Scotland have taken that forward. And again, it's trying to reinvigorate though. So if they do it 1 year, they do it the next year. We try to get more involved. So there are products out there. And again, particularly with ear tags, as has already been highlighted, very easy to remove, very easy to say, oh, the animal's taken it off on a barbed wire fence or whatever. We have had instances where, particularly crofting community, have tried to do individual lug markings, you know, by cutting into a sheep's ear. Some of them looked absolutely horrific and there was basically no ear left. But as we said to them, again, how do you identify, you know, that that is yours and you have done that? So the Tech Tracer product, really useful because it narrows down the data dots to that individual farmer who has bought the product. So it's something that's out there that might be of use to others.
Yeah, definitely. Nice. Great. I had, let's see, Oliver, I think, wanted to ask a question. So feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and pose your question. Kyle, is he able to unmute himself?
Yeah, I've just set a request to unmute.
Okay.
Okay. I live in the south of England, and the themes that are coming through from the speakers is mirrored here in the south of England. There are some fairly critical differences. Compared to New South Wales, the area of Hampshire is very small, but it is very heavily populated. We've seen a change in the last 10 years where intelligence shows us that north of 80% of rural crime is now serious organised crime related. In addition, the criminals are very fleet of foot. Once the police show any signs of getting on their case and starting to give them difficulty, they move to another county. We've discovered that there is an insurance issue locked into this, because for some time, to enable market share, one of the big insurance companies that is linked to the farming community, called the NFU Mutual, National Farmers Union Mutual, have been paying out even if the farmers have been leaving keys in quads overnight. And that has led to a prop in the market for the quad producers, because if the money is available for a new quad to be purchased almost immediately, that, so far as they're concerned, is another sale. The ignition systems on most of our tractors, quads, motorbikes, are all single key. They're not secure. The manufacturers are not inclined to put immobilizers on. Picking up Chris's point, we struggle because there are a lot of policemen who have grown up in towns and cities, and they don't want to come into the rural because they find it's a whole different way of life. They find that it is a more intimidating position to do their policing. And if you add to that the fact that the technology bit doesn't really work because of fractured mobile telephone communications, it's a real challenge. And if you take the major cities, for instance, in Hampshire, there is enough crime in those major cities that it's not entirely surprising. Police resources are very thin to provide adequate coverage in the rural. So there's just a wee snapshot from the south of England. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of the panelists want to respond?
I can just briefly, Oliver, and it's in Australia and New South Wales, and I think across Australia, it's probably no different. The same issues that you've identified there, and I won't drill down into the specifics of it, but a real issue, as you touched on, and whilst I skimmed through it in my presentation, is increasing the confidence and knowledge of police that not only don't know about stock theft, but have probably little to do with the rural industry and rural communities. So that our workshop and our Operation Stock Check, as we touched on, is all about that. We're very much, our rural crime investigators are very much entrenched in their local communities, and they've got a significant role in educating the uniformed police with them. But with all community engagement and education of police or otherwise, or just the take-up of security, it has to come with a consent issue, and that's the consent of the person that's being taught. So some people may not be interested ultimately, but it's a challenge for us and to chip away at those things. And we share the same concerns in respect to replacing items that are stolen, they've got the keys in them, etc. But we just try and probably manage those things that we can control, and what we can control is increase our knowledge of in rural crime investigations and our capability to prevent, disrupt and respond to rural crime.
Thank you, Cameron. I know we have about three questions in line right now, so first I'll go ahead and give it over to Carl. I think he had his hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, just touch on some of Cameron's points in relation to the technology and some of the questions in relation to NLIS. And for your information, I work with Tory in Victoria. So one of the issues that we have with the NLIS system is that it's really designed for biosecurity measures, not for crime prevention or investigation. So as Cameron said, a lot of technology's got to catch up with that, but I think legislation does as well in our jurisdiction at least. And that's something that we're agitating for, is for that legislation to change and be a little bit tighter on animal movements so that we can track them a lot better. And I think that with the advancement of the technologies that are being trialled, as Kyle said, and others, I think that we're in a far better position in the coming years to investigate stock theft and other rural crimes.
Yeah, and I might just touch on that too, Carl. And g'day, mate. I didn't know you were there. So NLIS, as you say, is from paddock to plate type setup. And the onus falls on the farmer to make sure the records are updated. And I won't go too much into the system, but some exciting things that are happening. And I missed that part when the computer went down. How I was talking about technology being great, it failed me on this occasion. Is that the incorporation of DNA into an identification system, like attached to an LIS, a significant stock database that we're doing work on in terms of ultimately one day we hope that we could establish that the piece of meat that you've got on your plate can be tracked back to a certain location within the state, but and also the GPS tagging. So NLIS is something that will complement and supplement that from a law enforcement and we don't rely on it totally for law enforcement purposes, that is. So.
Thank you, Cameron. I wanted to pose, there's one question that's kind of aimed at everyone. Campbell said, I'd be interested to know if the COVID border restrictions across the globe, particularly in Australia, have had any identified impacts on rural crime offending, either with stock or equipment theft. And to kind of follow that, has it reflected victimization occurring only within states, or has it suggested higher than anticipated levels of cross-border criminal enterprise generally? I have a two-part question there.
Shall I go first, Jess?
Yeah, go for it.
Certainly for the UK and certainly then for Scotland. Scotland imposed a national lockdown in conjunction with the UK, and at the start of the lockdown it was very notable because nobody was moving and everybody adhered very well to the restrictions. During that time, which was for us start of April to round about sort of the end of May, in particular with the lockdowns, rural crime throughout Scotland declined by 39%, which was obviously very encouraging. Those who were perpetrating actually were able to be spotted and caught very easily, so detections went up. And particularly cross-border, as the restrictions started to ease in the UK, different areas had different restriction levels. So in Scotland, we started to find round about the northeast of England where there were certain crime groups, they were certainly targeting cross-border and coming into Scotland. But again, because different restrictions, we were then able to target them perhaps easier than colleagues down south. As the restrictions and time has moved on, that we've started then to find that it's a slow trickle and it's an increase. But to maybe echo the comments of the gentleman from down south who commented earlier, Scotland so far, we're still relatively slow in terms of crime for within the rural environments, which is good. We're below the UK average for plant theft, livestock theft, and a variety of other crimes and offences associated with the rural environment. It may just be that up here everybody seems to have adhered more to the guidelines and restrictions, perhaps a bit more than down south. But also we know for a fact that some key individuals got the jail, were apprehended and are behind bars, particularly at the start of lockdown, which has then gone into where we are just now.
Does anyone else want to add to that one?
I'll give you our perspective just briefly. So the state of Victoria has been in quite a severe lockdown since July now, and we have just started to notice maybe a slight decrease in livestock theft. It is a bit hard to tell whether it is an immediate impact of COVID restrictions because there is that delay in reporting. We do really notice that is quite big here, but it does certainly seem to suggest that livestock theft and equipment theft is slightly down. In terms of cross-border, we have very strict border restrictions at the moment with New South Wales and South Australia. There doesn't appear to have been any increase in our state because they can't get across the border, but we're just in the early stages of wanting to discuss with New South Wales and South Australia a lot more in terms of looking at that cross-border offending.
Thank you. I know that I had a couple questions. I wanted to go back up and make sure that I didn't miss any. I did have one earlier, I think from Vania, that was underreporting of rural crimes is something chronic that's everywhere. What specifically do you do to promote crime reporting in rural areas? So I'll just pose that one to all the panelists.
I'll go first if that's okay. I'll try and make it brief. It probably just touches on a couple of things I touched in my presentation. Is one is just increasing a capability to take the report and to ensure that your report will be taken seriously. And I think most farmers are quite open to the fact that you may not solve the crime. They just want you to have a really good go at solving the crime. And what we try and do is, on top of that, is report on our victories, but also report quite regularly on our what we can do in certain circumstances, whether it be giving advice on crime scene preservation, target hardening, etc. But it gets back to communicating back to your population about the small things that are happening around your property. Like I said, in the bigger cities, you won't get a report of 10 litres of diesel being stolen, but if we report on those in our rural areas that may have populations of only a couple of thousands or only a couple of hundred, they know that something's going on that will impact upon their farm. So as we know, those smaller crimes are quite often linked to bigger crimes. So it's more or less just, I'd suggest just backing up what you say with your capability in terms of your prevention and your response to rural crime, but also reporting on those that you lock up. It comes to a confidence thing, I think.
Yes. If I may, is it okay?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, for us in France, the idea of Gendarme without office is to push the Gendarme to go to the small villages and to encourage the people to file complaints or to report crimes, because most of these people at the rural side, they feel abandoned by all civil services. there are no more post offices, for example, or no doctors, and they feel totally out of the system, and many of them, they are no more, they have no more confidence in the public institution. So the gendarme have to go there and to convince them to go back to them, to build new relationships with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian.
I think, Jess, just to sort of round that up as well, certainly for ourselves, with Scotland being very remote in certain areas, visibility is key. So we try to make a point of ensuring that we cover as much geography as possible. And then importantly, not having just been there once, we return again and again. Also attend rural events, agricultural shows, be part of the community as much as possible. And what we've tried to engender is back down to this ownership idea, try to make rural communities own their community, contribute towards it, be resilient and gain confidence by whatever it is that they report will be taken seriously. We give them Rural Watch as an option where they can phone, we can send out alerts and it's in real time. Also then there's Crime Stoppers, and there is obviously then the police numbers. But for us, visibility and on a regular basis, and trying to change that perception that Police Scotland, as with our policing areas throughout the world, now recognise that rural crime is an important aspect of policing. Therefore, it deserves the same level of policing, whether you're in a major city or town.
Thanks. Thank you, Alan. I also wanted to mention, kind of following something, John Barr mentioned that, Alan, when you talked about Tech Tracer in respect to sheep theft, he said that he will be putting some details on for Tech Tracer on the Twitter feed. So just so that everyone's aware of that, if you're interested in learning a little bit more, that will be there. We've got more time if people want to kind of stay on. We do have one other question, but I know that some people might be, wanting to kind of move on. So I want to kind of put a few other things out there just to kind of wrap up, and then we'll have the last few minutes to pose this final question for those who do want to stick around a little bit longer. First off, we definitely want to thank the panelists for being here. I know that this was a, significant amount of time for everyone to take out of their days, whether it's morning or nighttime. We definitely want to thank all the attendees, because without having you here, it would be a little bit boring with just the 5-6 of us. So we appreciate you all being here. We definitely are, as far as ISSRC goes, we will have the recording of this up on the website, and we've got a lot of exciting things going on with the organization. So if you haven't joined, feel free to join us so that you'll get all the details about different events that we do like this. We've actually started an awards program. So we've got applications actually going out now for early career researchers. So if you know anyone that you want to nominate, feel free to reach out to someone within the organization. Otherwise, I think that is about it. So if you want to stick around, feel free. We have, I guess, 15 more minutes. So I've got another question I might pose to the panelists. Otherwise, feel free to go ahead and exit. So
If I can just say something about the awards before we get too far from it. We've just released the one award, but we've actually developed several. And I think the point of this panel is a practitioner-based panel focused on the actual practice of rural policing. So it should be mentioned that we also have a practitioner award forthcoming, which is the society's attempt to recognize the contributions to rural fighting rural crime, combating rural crime, and rural crime research that practitioners make overall. So just keep an eye out for that in the near future.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. So I think, like I said, we will go ahead and kind of wrap it up, but I do have one more question that's actually for Cameron. So Cameron, if you have a few minutes, do you have a few minutes?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I do. I've got hours. I was going to see how long I can keep you up for, Jess.
Oh, great. Okay. Let me go up here. So let's see. This is from Logan Ledford, asked, is there difficulty getting farmers to attend the workshops about crime scene prevention or preservation? And if so, do you find that those who attend are less reluctant to report crimes?
It is a good question, and it's something that we started to tackle back in the end of 2018. And just a short history to that is that we're finding that farmers generally are quite trusting souls, and understandably so, because they live in areas that for many years have trusted these type of things wouldn't happen. So we saw an opportunity early on to join forces with the New South Wales Farmers Association. And we, over a period of 3 weeks, we kicked off and went around the state in 26 locations around New South Wales, where we spoke for about 3 hours. And it was, although it was quite rushed. Initially, some places we only had 4 or 5 people, but they had travelled on a round trip from some of their properties for 300 kilometres one way, then went back. But as the forums grew and the word got out, it increased the numbers quite significantly. But what's happened since then is that that helped us quite a bit to be identified, the New South Wales Police Force having a specialist area for for rural crime, and we marketed our social media platform, the Rural Crime Prevention Team, quite significantly. So, albeit the initial the attendance was low, in some places it became quite high, and then we're in the process of being more strategic in our delivery, because we presented the same presentation to all those locations. And in New South Wales, the rural crime, whilst it's consistent, is quite diverse in different the type of stock stole and the type of crime that's been experienced. So we're in the process of planning a further tour of duty, like a constant one over the 12-month period, targeting local areas with local crimes. But COVID came, and now that's developed into a webinar approach, which I haven't got the dates before me, but they'll be on our social media page if you follow the Rural Crime Prevention Team. And it's open to anyone, just not members of the New South Wales Farmers Association. And we've only just we haven't advertised it yet, and I think for the first webinar that we've got 60 people coming to watch the or interact with it. It's going to be run by the detective sergeants around the state, and the topics are illegal hunting, trespassing, firearms, Operation Stock Check, target hardening, reporting rural crimes, and crime scene preservation. So, so initially, that's where we more or less instead of if they won't come to us, we've got to go to them, and we're using the social media platform. And I think COVID-19 has taught us we can do that quite effectively. And but we also supplement that with speaking at our another presentation coming up at our Australian Livestock and Carriers Association. But we also, when we're COVID-free, we go to our community field days, which is about 20 of them around the state. So, but again, it's about selling what you do, and we're finding there's a definite increase. We're finding through the drought period that stock theft did not drop down in terms of the numbers that have been reported, and we put that down to having a presence and having the ability to take the crime seriously. Again, we can't solve every crime, we don't promote that, but what we do, we give a commitment that we'll take it seriously and investigate it. So, and then mirrored into that and slotted into that is we tell and inform the farmers on the ways they can report the crimes, whether it be on the internet, in person, etc. So we're finding that for an example, as I said, through drought, the stock theft, which traditionally you'd think would drop, we still think it may have dropped, but the reporting is consistent because we're increasing our capability to do that. So we have got a long way to go, and we're always looking at different ways that we can reinvent ourselves so we do report. But I encourage you just to have a look at our social media page, and you'll see over time how it's grown over the last 2 years and the things that we do. And I think that's really impacted upon the amount of crime that's being reported. So I don't know if I've adequately answered all that or if I missed a part of it, but it's just a more or less, I think in simple terms, I think we can overcomplicate rural crime. It's in all crime, it's quite basic. As an investigator, there's only very simple things you have to do to combat a crime and to report a crime. And it's just more or less giving our first responders the the skills to do that, but more or less as a rural crime prevention team, have the ability to back up what you say. And if you can't solve those crimes, call it quite early, and then just keep up the relationship and build on that relationship. So, yeah, so if there's anything else if I've missed something, please tell me.
Thank you, Cameron. I don't see any other questions coming up. Kyle, have you seen any hands raised?
No, I think we've about rounded out the session and covered everything.
Okay, yeah, looks like it.
Alistair, would you like to make a reappearance? He's been busy in the background on Twitter.
Yeah, here I am.
There you go.
Hello, everybody. So, well, if I could just add my 2 cents worth, thanks very much to the 4 panelists, and particularly if I could thank Jessica. What a fantastic job she's done today in hosting our session.
Thank you, Alistair. Well, I think that wraps us up today. So we really appreciate, again, the panelists. Thank you so much. I know that we've been planning and going back and forth, so it's great to finally meet you all virtually and put some names to faces. So I appreciate everything with you all. And then thanks everybody for joining us today.